On the 11th of June 2006, a video called "Sony Scary Clip" was posted onto YouTube. It quickly went viral, garnering millions of views and becoming one of the first quote-unquote scary videos to blow up on the website. The video was simple in nature. It showed us a portrait of a young woman and stated that anybody who viewed this painting for longer than 5 minutes had strange reactions to the piece. They said they could see the girl's face slowly changing. Occasionally they could see her smirk or frown. Maybe they could see her eyes widen, and the longer they looked at the photo, they started to feel stranger and stranger. It was just a simple portrait of an innocent enough looking woman, but it was enough to make people feel uneasy. There was even a backstory at the beginning of this video that stated the piece was made by a teenage girl in Japan who posted this painting online shortly before taking her own life. With this additional context, the painting seemed even more disturbing, but in reality, this story was completely made up. The portrait is actually created by an artist known as Robert Chang, and it was for a sci-fi and fantasy screenplay he was creating called Tellurian Sky. This character was known as Rue, and according to Robert Chang, years before this video was even created, this urban legend was floating around the internet, but it was entirely false. However, what is seemingly real is how people reacted to the piece. Even after the made-up backstory had been debunked, people continued to talk about how this portrait made them feel, about how they could see her face move or slightly change if they stared at it for too long. Something about the color patterns, the woman's eyes, or something else entirely was enough to make people believe that this painting almost had a mind of its own. And this is a phenomenon that's actually happened time and time again, where an artist creates a piece that almost feels sentient, as if it's actually moving, emoting, or doing something that it shouldn't be. Sometimes it happens inadvertently, other times it's done intentionally, and there are other occasions where it happens in almost an unexplainable fashion. So that's what I'm going to be talking about today. We're going to have a look at a collection of paintings and portraits and try to answer the question, what makes a painting feel alive? Jillian's Ghost is an artist who went viral in the summer of 2024 for a collection of paintings that piqued people's interest. They were primarily portraits of women with striking appearances, strong colors, and most importantly, eyes that were extremely expressive. People began to comment that they felt like the painting was moving or staring directly at them. Some people commented that they felt like a soul was trapped inside these paintings or that one of the eyes was real or blinking. Either way, people were noticeably reacting to how sentient these portraits felt. This portrait, called Hungry Eyes, definitely falls into this category. When you stare at it for long enough, you can start to see why people had the reactions that they did. The eyes are the most realistic part of the piece. They stand out in almost an uncanny fashion, and it's hard to look away from them sometimes. I actually reached out to Jillian herself and asked her how she goes about creating this style of art and how this process of making this style began. She said the following: "One night I was in an artsy mood and I didn't feel like getting all of my paint out, so I just had crayons and dollar store construction paper. That was the first time I accidentally created something that scared me. I thought I was just overtired and delusional, but it felt like no matter where I was positioned, the eyes were looking into my soul, and I had that weird feeling in my stomach, like our eyes were meeting, and she was looking at me directly. I made a video about it and it ended up blowing up because a lot of people felt like she was real. That was all just an accident. I didn't mean to make her look so alive." It's amazing to think that something so expressive was created with such simple resources, that Jillian was able to conjure up something like this with basic construction paper and a few crayons. It feels like the simplicity, the color patterns, and the amount of emotion in the eyes of these portraits has accidentally created an effect that has made them feel so alive. You can find this style in most of Jillian's work, along with some other fantastic portraits. I'm going to link her pages down below. Personally, I think her pieces will stay with me for a long time, and I highly recommend you check out her work as well. Jenny Savile is an artist from Cambridge, England, who rose to prominence in the 90s because of her expressive, striking, and colorful art. In the beginning of her career, she was known for creating large portraits of nude women, but she has many other pieces that have depicted an array of people, including herself. Her art style pulls no punches. She paints human beings in a very real and revealing fashion. She stated that a lot of her work stems from the anxiety that comes from living with flesh, and you can see the same sentiment in some of her other work. This piece, simply titled Figure 1126, is a good example of what makes her style so poignant and memorable. Again, the eyes are striking and emotive, but the rest of the portrait feels quite cold and almost haunting. It's difficult to put into words the effect some of her portraits seem to have. This is a self-portrait she created in 2019. Again, you can see the use of harsh colors and vivid imagery, and once again, there's a feeling of coldness about the piece. Unlike some of the other paintings we've talked about, these pieces don't make the viewer feel like anything's moving or that there's something else going on with these portraits. If anything, they actually feel eerily still, and it's that stillness that gives viewers a strange feeling. It's like you're intruding on their personal space, or seeing somebody in an element that you're not supposed to be seeing them in. She also uses very claustrophobic framing in her work, so that you feel like you are right there with them. This is what makes Jenny's style so impactful, and creates a lasting impression for the viewers. They can sometimes be uncomfortable, in your face, and even slightly invasive, but there is no doubting their authenticity, and that rawness is what makes you almost empathize with the people in the portraits, whether it's questioning their situations or thinking deeper about who they actually are. She did an interview with National Galleries where she talked about the up-close and personal nature of her work and why she chooses to create such intense and revealing paintings.
Somebody wrote about my work recently and said it was like looking at life through a microscope, and I thought, like an enlarged area of life, and I thought that's quite right. That's probably what I'm childlike in that sense, like the way a child will turn a stone over and look underneath the stone. I've got that impulse still, and I cherish that I'm lucky enough not to have had to grow up. I am quintessentially figurative. I am rooted in figuration, and actually, maybe it's not figuration, picture making. I am a picture maker, I'm an image maker. Even if I start completely abstract, which I do often, just throw loads of paint on a canvas, my animal instinct is to make something of it. Not to just have paint sensation, but to make an image. And it's that acceptance of my nature that's kept me figurative, I think.
This microscopic lens she views people through, and the decision to defy conventional beauty norms, are exactly what makes her portraits so unique. She doesn't set out to make the people who view her work uncomfortable, but when you're staring at a person who's in such a vulnerable and revealing state, it can be hard not to connect with these paintings on a somewhat deeper level. It's not that her work necessarily feels real, they simply are real, and that authenticity makes for a truly one-of-a-kind style of art that separates Jenny Savile from the rest of her peers. This is not a photograph. It is a hyper-realistic painting created by Jung. It is widely considered to be one of the most realistic paintings ever made. No matter where you zoom into, or how much you zoom in, you will not find a part of this painting that is a dead giveaway, unless you have a keen eye. Jung actually spent time painting each individual fiber of this woman's sweater, and it's safe to say that this could very easily be confused for a picture of an actual person in almost any capacity. And that is the case with most of Jung's work. This specific portrait took 9 months, and many of his pieces take a great deal of time. He puts an immense amount of effort into every single detail of his pieces to ensure that it looks as realistic as possible. Sometimes his work ventures into the uncanny territory. This painting was created in 2015 and once again caught people off guard. Not only is there a hyper-realistic depiction of a woman in this painting, but there's also a realistic reflection, a practice that was often avoided in hyperrealism because of how difficult it is to achieve. And yet, Jung pulled it off successfully and once again had people believing that this was a photograph. Jung is a prolific artist, and this isn't the only style of art that he creates. In 1995, he created a piece known as Century Sceneries 3. The painting is a combination of industrial rubble and children's toys. It may seem strange at first, but it was actually created after the Sangpum department store collapse, which also happened in 1995 in South Korea and claimed the lives of 502 people. Jung created this as a response. And when you have the context, the toys lying amongst the rubble seem more depressing and harrowing. So how did he go from creating pieces like this to making paintings like this? Well, he stated in interviews that ultimately he wants his work to simply connect to people, and creating work where he depicts other humans in the most realistic fashion possible is the best way to do that. He's also stated the difficulty of what he does makes him the best artist he can possibly be. He stated the following in an interview: "I want to push my painting skills to a higher level. What is the most difficult thing? to paint people, still life or rusted metals. They are not something we see every day, but people deal with people the most. To portray people and make others believe is the hardest thing. Well, it's safe to say he certainly achieved his goal of making his viewers genuinely believe in his work, in more ways than one. To this day, Jung continues to create this style of art, and he's essentially in a competition with himself, trying to top the work he's already created. It's hard to tell if he'll succeed, or if there even is another level above what he is already doing, but it will be interesting to keep up with his artistic pursuits and find out if he can in fact make something that feels even more realistic than the art he has already created. In the beginning, we asked the question, what makes a painting feel real? And through doing the research for this video, I have realized the answer is not black and white. In some cases, it can be hyperrealism, spending months and months creating a piece so that it looks as real as possible. Other times, a piece can still feel real or sentient, even if it's done overnight with relatively limited resources. Sometimes it was never the intention to begin with, or maybe it's simply a byproduct of an artist trying to create the most authentic work possible. Although the artists we have discussed have different styles and methods of creating their work and make what they make for completely different reasons, ultimately why they are successful and why their work is talked about so much is because it simply connects with people. Whether it's making people feel like these art pieces have a life of their own, or simply depicting humans in an honest and raw fashion, these artists have created a style that evokes a reaction, the type that makes a passerby at a museum stop and stare. In the end, that's what a good piece of art should do. When people feel something or connect to what you have created, you have already succeeded. A piece of art can only feel real or authentic if people react to it in that way. It doesn't matter how you get there. So I don't know exactly what makes a painting feel real. There doesn't seem to be any specific formula to achieve that. It can happen in a multitude of ways, and as a matter of fact, I think it's mostly up to you. If it feels real, then it is real.